So when you're approaching one of these projects, there's so many different aspects to them. There's the technical, there's the implementation, the research, the cognitive science. How do you have teams assembled to sort of work on these kinds of problems?
Yeah, so getting teams of learning experts, designers, measurement people together, this is a big challenge. They're different cultures. I mean, they're really, and people don't understand it. So I was co-director of a very large National Science Foundation center on the science of learning sciences, and this was to look at the social aspects of informal learning, and so like language learning or museums, things like that. And there's all these different disciplines, and they don't know how to talk to each other, and everybody wants everybody to sort of work for them, right? They don't want to collaborate. They're sort of, so like when I would talk
come into my camp.
That's right. Move into my house, basically. So. And so these are immature fields. It's not like I can throw something over at the fence of them. I've got an algorithm you could use here, take this. It's not like that. And so our solution was with the luxury of a center, we got 6 faculty to agree to sit in a room for a year every week. And that's sort of what it took for me to finally understand why that result is important to that guy. And that was sort of the breakthrough. So you want to do a design, and you want to have your learning scientist, your game designer, your psychometrician. You're going to have to build the capacity, right? It's not there yet. There are places who are trying to get people who sort of emphasize one thing and know little bits about other things, and so they can talk to people who know lots about this thing and a little bit about their thing.
Do you think MOOCs have particular challenge in this space when they're thinking about innovation in educational technology?
Yeah, so MOOCs, I don't know. When I think of MOOCs, I think of fast and cheap. That's what they were designed for. Get it out there fast and cheap. There is a new type of coding for encryption strategies, for security and computer science. You can't wait for a textbook, right? You make it fast and cheap. You take the worst form of instruction known to man, which is a stand-up lecture to an anonymous audience, and then people go do a bunch of problems, right? And that's what the initial MOOCs were. So, scale. And so there's a lot of merit to that, fast and cheap. What will they evolve into? Where suddenly people are now making tools that give you more control over who gets to collaborate. They're becoming more flexible, better platforms. They could start being more interesting things. The blessing of the MOOC is that it has gotten people interested in learning technology, right? And so, here in Silicon Valley, and a lot of venture people trying to figure out, is there a way to capitalize on this, and now they have kids growing up, and so they're interested in education. So this is a good thing. The bad thing is that maybe it's sort of the energy's going in the wrong way a little bit. But I would say that no matter what it is. I mean, that's sort of my job. So I think the MOOCs raise a lot of interest, a lot of energy. I think the sort of fast and cheap is people are sort of racing to be the platform provider, and so maybe it's not the best platform. And so next generations could be quite interesting, where it's easier to put simulations in to collect data from them. So people are data mining out of the MOOCs that are there, but they're sort of data mining in a really artificial situation that only allows you to teach one way, and so whatever data you're getting out, it's not going to generalize beyond that MOOC. But that should change. They should become more powerful, more useful. So I think on the technology side, it's an exciting time. You hope it doesn't become a runaway train, or that it does the other thing, the balloon bursts and people say there was no there. But in the meantime, there's a lot of energy, excitement. Building teams for the MOOCs, it's a good idea. It's not obvious to me that most rank and file faculty who want to create an online course want to spend the time to have, say, a learning scientist say, well, no, the way you've usually taught it isn't exactly right if you want this concept, right? What they're doing is they're taking the way they've always taught it and polishing it. And so that's not leading to the best stuff ever, right. But it is fast and cheap. But you were talking about MOOCs specifically. I'm thinking of other kinds of technologies, so simulations can give kids exposure to invisible mechanism. They can interact with a nuclear reactor. They're not doing that in the real.
Absolutely.
And so I think there's a lot of interesting technology things that could go in and go at scale, but not necessarily MOOCs, which are kind of stand and deliver platforms.
I see the model I have for K-12 is more like the Khan Academy model, which is not simulations. I think it's closer to MOOCs than to the sort of rich interactive kinds of simulations, but it's neither one of them really.
Yeah, so the Khan Academy is very good at a very specific thing. It's very good at sort of knowing the procedures that you need to execute. Personally, I see it as a great remedial source. When I was having trouble with my statistics course that I was teaching to make my own MOOC in stats, and I realized I didn't understand this concept, what did I do? I went to the Khan Academy because Wikipedia was too hard, and unfortunately, it didn't help. But so I see a place for the Khan Academy. There have always been things like this for like reading, where things where you really do want a high degree of efficiency, routineness, low variability. So you would get these programs that would get you to read faster and faster, and they ask the comprehension questions. They look surprisingly like the standardized tests by the end, learn the vocabulary. These are fabulous, right? But for me to do that and never read a novel seems like a mistake, right? But I do think there's a lot that technology can do for schools. And so it brings us to this point of assessment again, right? Which is you sort of need to give people the evidence that there are other things besides achievement measures that matter. So I'll disagree with you a little bit. Every superintendent I've talked to, and I've asked them what I can do for them, I expect them to say, I expect him or her to say, well, could you get our kids to do better on the achievement test? And it's never what they say. They always say, at our school, we're working on collaboration. Do you have a measure for that? Or at our school, we're working on innovation. Do you have a way to measure that? And so every school has, the superintendent, the principal wants to put their imprint. They have a look and feel. They want assessments for it. So they're looking to other people, not the textbook providers and the test makers, to help them see, are they achieving these goals that they and their parents think are very important.
So they know where they want to get to. They need some validation along the way that they're getting towards that place.
That's right. And a good assessment isn't just a validation. It sort of clarifies what are the goals, right? And I mean, that's the problem with assessments, is they're a tail that wags the dog. But a good assessment, like if I make an assessment that says the kids aren't choosing negative feedback, it's a very clear signal to the teachers, the principal, the superintendent. Oh, that's the goal. Now I get it. That's part of design thinking. Because I just heard design thinking's great.
Right.
And boy, I want to do more of it, and so these assessments make things more specific.
You've done some interesting work on teachable agents. Can you tell me about that work?
Yeah. So this is the idea that you learn by teaching. It's sort of truism. So it's kind of at the era when people were making cognitive tutors and really putting a lot of energy in how to get the computer to teach kids, we thought, geez, why don't we have the kids teach the computer? And so we kind of personified it. You have this character and you're sort of teaching it, and then you get to see it reason with what you've taught it. And it always reasons correctly. But if you taught it the wrong stuff, it'll reach the wrong conclusions. And so this has been, every study we do, it turns up roses. And it turns up roses in a special way, in that it's actually teaching the kids how to think. They're learning the content better, but they're also learning to model the way the agent thinks. So we take sort of simple AI approaches like search, and the agent models search, and then the kids learn to think in terms of search, or qualitative reasoning, or hypothetico-deductive. So this is a technology that sort of, you basically propose to get funding from a federal agency to do research, and you take a little bit of that money to make the technology. And so, we've cobbled together this technology, and it always works well. But nobody else has sort of been able to recreate it because they don't do the homework. They just sort of try and steal it off the shelf. So now the technology is getting old. Right, it's like in Java. It looks like Java. It's got little squares, and it's time for iPad. It's time for tablets, right? And it's time to make it for schools that now have internet. And so what do? We've got this technology that's been very successful. It was never sort of had game designers in it, so the ramp in, it doesn't let you have an early success, so you get addicted and keep going. So now we're at this situation where it's like, okay, nobody else is going to do it. This works well. I don't want it to end up like Raiders of the Lost Ark where it gets filed away. So now we're saying, okay, we're going to redo it, and we're going to, go beg for money or somehow get this funded. And we're trying to figure out what's the best way to do this, right? And so I have my shop that has a lot of expertise in teachable agents and measurement and learning. I have a school district here, an urban school district that is willing to let us actually run studies at the whole school level.
Wow.
So what we found is when you add teachable agents to the regular curriculum, the kids learn the regular curriculum better and they learn to do the reasoning. And so now, how do I put together the team for this, right? So EA's got a bunch of world-class game designers who are interested in education. Do I bring them in? Or is that going to turn into, a battle, right? Do they have the time to sit down? Or do I spec it out and say, please program this and give it to some company, for them to do sort of all the hardening of the technology? Do I go hire some soft money place that does research to do the research so I don't need all the bodies out there? Because, a school district's big and if you take over every class. But I already know the research design, and do they want to be labor? And so it's sort of how do I assemble a team when it's time to get big? And it's sort of like all this stuff. The key thing is the talent and the climate. That's going to be the key to the success of the designs, right? Can you find the talent? Can you make the climate? So that's the challenge, and I'm not an expert at this. So when the camera turns off, I'm going to ask you what to do.
All right. Well, thanks for talking to us today. It was really, really helpful, and thanks for sharing your work with us.
My pleasure.